Hello everybody, this is Code, the Naked Code Experience, and I'm back, not playing a game today though. I am going to be doing a tutorial guide on Fallout New Vegas, also Fallout 3, and Skyrim for ENB installation. Dark Matter Angel was really asking if I could do this for him, and I'm sure that this will be helpful for anybody else. There are a lot of tutorials online already on YouTube, but, you know, I don't mind doing this. If somebody asks me to do it, I'm going to do it. So I hope you guys enjoy this, but we're going to start with Fallout New Vegas because that one's the little bit more complicated version. Skyrim's a little bit more simple, but the same idea applies to both in the same regard. So first what you're going to want to do is go to your Fallout New Vegas installation folder. I have a shortcut up here, but I'm going to do it the slower way just to show you guys. So you're going to want to go to the installation drive that you have it in. In my case, local disk E, program files 86, Steam, Steam apps, common right here, and then Fallout New Vegas. So here's your installation folder of the game. In my case, I already have everything installed because you've already seen that I'm using ENBs. I have a bunch of mods. There are mod managers you can use, like Nexus Mod Manager or Mod Organizer for Fallout New Vegas. Both of those will work really well to maintain your mods. Mod Organizer is a lot more powerful than Mod Manager. Mod Manager is a little bit more simple point and click, but you can also overwrite a lot of things if you say if you install a texture mod and then you install a different texture mod that has the same textures, you're going to overwrite some of the textures you might not want to overwrite. While with Mod Organizer, you never overwrite anything because nothing's technically being put in the folder to be overwritten. They will have a priority assigned to them, which there's a whole other video on just using Mod Organizer over Mod Manager. But just keep that in mind if you're doing mods, like to look up some of those. In my case, for New Vegas, the only way I could get mods to work very properly for me is to manually install them into my folders myself and take care of how I'm doing it. Because when I'm using a mod organizer or mod manager, I always had conflicts and issues arise. While when I did it manually, nothing would ever come up. I did everything on my own, and it all came out perfect. So that's why my folder looks like this. You might see less depending on what you're doing, and more depending on what you're doing and what mod manager you're using. Either way, let's begin with it. So you just went to the Nexus and you downloaded a shiny new ENB and you love it and you want to use it because it looks wonderful. The way that your stuff's set up on your your monitor, your TV, or whatever, you went on there and their pictures look gorgeous to you. So you're going to use it in your game. That's understandable. So you go to wherever ENB you downloaded. In my case, I downloaded 47 ENB 2, the sequel. This is from Hitman. He's the same guy that does all the animations. You can find him on his YouTube page as well. He made his own ENB. So say like I wanted to use this, even though I'm not technically. I open the ENB in my downloads folder. I go into this. Typically speaking, if you go into any ENB, you're usually going to have a README of how it works. In this case, he didn't include an ENB because he assumes that the people downloading from Gunman Network are probably already know what they're going to do or know what they're doing. So he didn't include one. So that's why we're going to use this because it's very easy for me to explain and not just open the README and tell you read the README. You're going to go in here and you're going to see all these files. You can see there's a data folder. In this case, he includes his own weather mod. I wouldn't use it because I'm using my own. So if you don't want to use his data folder or anything like that, you can omit that. It's just keep in mind that if they're using a weather mod in their pictures and stuff like that that they made themselves, it's not going to look the same if you don't use the weather mod. Just keep that in mind. Either way, though, this is all the stuff you're going to want. ENB series, Sweet Effects, all the other stuff. You're just going to highlight all of it and drag and drop it into your folder here like this. I'm not going to do that, like I said, because I already have an ENB set up the proper way that I wanted it set up, so I don't want to do that. But yeah, you're going to toss all those folders in there and files in there. All of it's going to be set up proper. It's going to look nice and pretty in there. You're going to have a bunch of extra files, and you're going to be like, yay. It should be pretty close to done by that point. The difference is, though, in this case, I have this repackaged with a DLL in here, the D3D9 DLL. Don't worry, you're not supposed to have that in there technically. I just put it in there just to make it simpler. If I ever switched over this, I wouldn't have to go and get a DLL again. But typically speaking, if you go to the Nexus or anywhere else and you download a ENB at all, you're not going to have the D3D9 in there because it's not redistributable. So in that case, you're going to have all these files, but you're not done yet. Once you do that, you're going to go to ENB Dev. So ENB Dev is the website that Boris has set up for his graphic modifications. You're going to go here. You're going to see something similar to this. And it looks all nice and everything. You click News, and then you go to Downloads here. So now you can go down and you can see all the games they use an ENB out for. In this case, though, like I'd like to point out, a lot of these are not going to be updated regularly because he's not always into setting an ENB up for all these. Like, he has them set up once, and it's pretty much down to you to figure out the rest. In this case, though, for games like Skyrim, he updates regularly because he does that regularly. He enjoys that game, I'm pretty sure, so he has that regularly updated. For New Vegas, he kind of does because it's a very similar platform-ish. So this one's updated recently to 2.278. So you're going to click what I just did. So you're going to go here and you're going to click Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. And then click 0.278 and it'll download. Once it's downloaded, you go to your downloads folder and you'll see, ta-da, ENB Fallout 278. Now, there are two versions, the injector version and the wrapper version. It depends on which one you want to use. If you have problems with the wrapper version, switch to the injector version. In this case, I'm going to start with the wrapper version and explain that when you open this up, all you have to do is just take d3d9.dll and enbhost.exe just to make sure that you have the latest of both and throw it into your folder here. So you can just go like that, click these two, and just drag and drop right in here. That'll now essentially enable your ENB now for your game. That's if you're not using Fallout 4GB, Fallout New Vegas 4GB.exe. If you're not using that, you're done. That should install the ENB for you and everything should be good to go. You just run from NVSE and then you're ready to go. Now, if you're using Fallout New Vegas 4GB like I am, you have a little bit more complicated of a time because now whenever you have the game ready to go, you're going to have an EXE folder. When you first install Fallout New Vegas 4GB.exe, it's going to have this EXE folder show up for you. The reason being is because the only way for Fallout 4 New Vegas 4GB to work is it's going to have to run off of a separate EXE, not in the main folder. And then it'll help by searching for NVSE and running that as well. Now in this case, I have everything installed in here already, but I'll explain what I mean in a minute. So when you run with Fallout New Vegas 4GB, this will show up in here, and it's going to be using this EXE to run from. So the problem is, when you install an ENB, it won't recognize the DLL outside of this folder because this DLL needs to run with whatever EXE is running with the game, which would be this one. So in this case, if you ran Fallout New Vegas 4GB with all this stuff out here, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to see an ENB working at all. Some people don't have that issue. Some people have this weird thing that works where they'll run the game and it'll work as is just fine. They won't have to put anything else in the EXE folder. So what I recommend doing is once you have all the ENB stuff installed, try to run your game. If you don't see the ENB thing pop up in the top left corner to let you know that the ENB is installed properly and running, then you exit out of the game again and try this again. In my case, it doesn't work, so I have to install my ENBs into this folder. So basically what you do is you do the same thing that I told you to do in this folder here for the ENB itself. So you're going to go back to your ENB that you downloaded. Then you're going to go into this EXE folder here. Go away. And then you're going to open up this folder here, and you're going to take the same stuff, this to this, and you're going to drag and drop it in the EXE folder. Then, once again, like I said before, you're going to have to go into your Fallout New Vegas wrapper version, D3D9DLL, and ENB host. You can put in there. You probably don't need it in there, but you can if you'd like. Throw those in there well, because it's not going to hurt anything if you're redundant. The reason why I have to put every file from the ENB into this folder is because my game picks and chooses which folder it's going to be running from. It's weird. Like, I could probably show you if I really wanted to, but like, say like I have Fallout New Vegas like this, and I threw D3D9 DLL in there, and I left SMAA out, SweetFX out, and then say like something as simple as ENB local out here. It might run the SMAA, but then it won't run the INI, and then it won't run the FX for some reason. So I put everything in both folders for redundancy just to ensure that it'll run both, no matter which folder it's picking and choosing from. That's the way I would do it. You don't have to do it that way. You could try it just by putting the D3D9.dll and any other DLL from the ENB into the EXE folder and see if it works that way. If it works, leave it as it is. You're good to go. That's the way I would do it. Now, if you're having a problem where D3D9.dll does not work in the EXE folder, no matter what you do, you put it anywhere, it doesn't work, there might be a problem that you have that I had where I didn't update my Fallout New Vegas 4GB at all. It wasn't updated. If that was if that was the reason, then I can show you what you'd have to do. So in my case, we'd go to Fallout New Vegas here, and then say like you search 4GB right here, and you see 4GB Fallout New Vegas. Okay, so that's what I need. and you install. It's version 1.6, and then you realize later that this is from 2012. Then you go back down and you look. There's a Fallout New Vegas 4 GB updated. This one, by comparison, was last updated way later, February 2014, right? Now, this is the reason why I was having issues, and I didn't install this update. So, like, if you have Fallout New Vegas 4 GB and nothing's working for you, try this update first. If you already have the update, then we'll go to the next part. But this is the part I would pick. I would pick this, recommend a copy for Fallout New Vegas 4 GB EXE and the helper to the installation directory. Doing so will allow the tool to work with ENB, blah, 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 blah. Your mileage may vary. That is so true. Now, once you have that set up and you have the new installation folder, they say that you're going to want to run it once, like I said already. But they say that you want shortcut target box examples. This is in case something does not work. So like if you still have an issue where it's not working at all, like your game is still not running ENB, I would come back here and attempt to do this. Basically what it's saying to do is you're going to go to your shortcut here that you have for Fallout New Vegas 4 GB. You're going to right click it and go to properties. Now in the target folder, you're going to set what they have here. So you're going to have this all up in quotations. After the quotation, you put -LAAEXE space / Fallout New Vegas 4 GB.exe. You put that at the end of the command here. That's in case you're having issues you can't get it to run, so you could try that. For a lot of people, that works just fine. In my case, what I have is something called this. It's very similar. I'm pretty sure how it works, but it says -extra DLL space d3d9.dll space -extra DLL space d3d9 _ SMAA.dll. That's the way I get it to run. The only reason why I do that is just to ensure that it's running those. You might not need it at all. So before you do any of these shortcut target box additions, try it before you do that. If that works for you, all well and good. If it doesn't work for you, try what I said to do on mine. And if that doesn't work at all, if none of those options work, that's completely understandable. I would take this advice instead. Instead of using the wrapper version in your Fallout New Vegas, try the injector version instead now. Now what the injector version is, it's a separate EXE that you run that'll inject the ENB directly into your game via EXE instead of through a DLL. This will help alleviate some problems that people have, and I know that there's a majority of people that have this issue, so it's understandable. I used to have this issue before too. Now, say like you're using the older Fallout New Vegas 4 GB, the EXE, the injector version, worked for me flawlessly that way instead. So what I would typically do is you go into here instead, you open the injector version, and you go down here, and you'll see ENB host. I would copy that. ENB injector, copy that. ENB injector.ini, copy that. And last but not least, you need ENB series.dll. These 4 files, copy over into here. You can see I still have them in here just in case as a backup, but they don't run unless you run the EXE, so you don't need to worry about it. Once you have them copied over, so like I can go ahead and copy these 4 files over. I'll probably already have them. 3, I didn't have the 4th. You can copy them over, and then you look in here, you have an ENB injector. What you're going to want to do is open this. Whenever you're ready to open, buddy. There it goes. It took a little while to open for some reason. And you're going to see in here, library name ENB series.dll. That's why you need that DLL. It's running from that library. Then you go down, process name 0, Fallout New Vegas launcher. Yep, Fallout New Vegas.exe. Another one you might want to add, just in case, to make sure that they work. This is down to speculation because some people say add everything, other people say don't. You see NVSE _ loader? I would go ahead and add that in here. NVSE _ loader, or, wow, I can't type today, .exe. I would go ahead and add that in here. And then the next one, you want to go down to the next process name, and you go to Fallout New Vegas 4 GB.exe. FNV4GB.exe. You have both of those in there now, so now this target process should recognize when you open any of those and hook into the game. That's what I typically do. More than likely, though, if you have the injector.ini in here, typically speaking, when you run Fallout New Vegas 4 GB, it's going to open up Fallout New Vegas, and this should hook into that anyway. So you shouldn't have a problem with it anyway. Some people have a problem, and I did before too, where if I run Fallout New Vegas 4 GB while the ENB injector is open, it'll run this, then this process will scan and not find Fallout New Vegas running, so it won't run. Then this would open Fallout New Vegas, and for some reason the injector wouldn't recognize that it opened. But when I put this in here, Fallout New Vegas 4GB, it would recognize that's in there, and then it would try to hook into that, and then it would open Fallout New Vegas, and it would recognize Fallout New Vegas is open, and then hook into that. It worked for me that way. Some people it works that way, some people they don't need to do anything at all. So I would try that if it doesn't work with the injector right away. But now once you have all this set up, you can just go to enbinjector.exe, make sure you're running it as administrator, and then you'll see this pop up here. You have nothing to do with this now. Just make sure this is open, then you can run your Fallout New Vegas 4GB.exe. You run it, and it should hook into the game, and you should see it in there at all. Now, the other thing I would like to point out, too, is if you have some issues with it still not recognizing the game, that might be because you clicked hide to tray. Now, in my case, still, mine's one of the wonkiest Fallout New Vegases that I've ever seen. If I click hide to tray, and it's sitting down here, it will not hook into the game whatsoever. I don't know why. It just never did. So I'd have to come back out of the game and start it up, run as administrator, and I leave it in the top left corner open like this because for some reason the priority is different that way. If you're having issues with it running, leave it open like that too. That's the way I would do it just to see if it works. That's the way that I run most of my ENBs now, guys. So in my case, the D3D9.ELL works, .dll works. So go ahead and leave it as it is. Once you have it all set up and running, it should run directly from this folder, and then you should get your ENB to work. That's the hard work, guys. That's pretty much all you need to do to get your ENB to work. Like I said, if you're not using Fallout New Vegas 4GB, you should just all put it in this folder, and it should work flawlessly as it is. If you're having a little bit harder of an issue and it's not running, it's understandable. So like you'd have to go back through, and you're going to have to check your exe file here and put it all in here and see if it works then. So that's just the reiteration is just trial and error, follow these steps that I was saying, and see if it works. Put it in your main folder first. If it doesn't work, put it in the exe folder. If that doesn't work, make sure that your Fallout New Vegas 4GB is updated. Then try both on the Fallout New Vegas 4GB updated download page, try their executable extensions when you go to the properties and the target file here. Try their extension there. If theirs doesn't work, try the extension I wrote here. If that doesn't work, you might want to go to the injector, like I said. Last but not least, the most important thing you want to do is set up enblocal.ini. That's a very important file that you want to set up to your computer's specifications. The reason why I'm saying this is because if you don't have enblocal set up to your specifications, the game won't run as pretty. You might have a lot more stuttering. Now, in my case, I have a little bit outdated graphics cards still. I have two GTX 670 2GB in SLI. They're for the Win edition, so they are very powerful, but they have very limited VRAM, so that's why I sometimes have issues with crashing. So just keep that in mind. But if you go into here, you can tell that the ENB I'm using is Evolution Ghost because he has it set up. Now, enable proxy library, all this should be set true, and then the proxy library, whatever the author for their ENB has in that proxy library, you might want to use. Now, for the rest of it, speed hack, I would just leave as true. It doesn't really change much anymore for anybody. Force video adapter index, leave that at false. The reason why is this is for a lot older video cards, so I wouldn't mess with that now. If you're having issues with an older video card running an ENB, Google it then at that point because there's not much I can help you with. I don't have very old cards, so I can't really tell you how to get that running. Now, for memory, this is the important part. Expand system memory, leave that true. Reduce system memory usage, leave that true. Disable driver memory manager, that might be hit or miss. Mine was true in this, so I left it as true. Disable preload to VRAM, leave this false. Unsave memory hacks, leave this false. Unless if you found somebody that has an experimental problem with the same graphics card you have and they enable that helps you, go ahead and try it then. Now these are the two important parts. Reserve memory size megabytes, 512. Video memory size megabytes, 10240. Now, the memory size megabytes, you could try this first. Try 256 first as a safe medium. The reason why is because you could switch 256 to 512 to 768. I think those are the three that you could use. You want to try 256 first because it's the smallest increment, and most people don't have a problem with that. If you're having stuttering issues or some other problems, try 512 or 768 if you have the video memory size. My case is the 2GB card, so going up to 768 or anything like that's a little bit much. It's reserving a little bit too much. So 512 is a good medium for me. Try 256 first. If you have no stuttering issues and it's fine, leave it as it is. If you have a little bit of stuttering, try 512, etc., etc. Or vice versa. If you have problems with 512, go down to 256. Now for video memory size in megabytes, there's a formula you can look up online for that is dependent on Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10, etc., whatever one you have. Or there's an older way that was addition of your RAM and VRAM together, minus 2048. So what we're basically going to do is I'm just going to explain it this way. If you have over 16 gigabytes of RAM and you have at least 2 gigabytes of video memory, 10240 is where I'd probably put it, because that's going to max out. The max for ENB is 10240. And the way that it typically works is you add your VRAM to your RAM and then subtract 2048 from it. So in my case, that'd be 16 gigabytes. So it's like 16348 or something like that, plus 2048. So you can already see I'm well over 10240, so 10240. I don't need to do the rest of the addition. Say like you have 4 gigabytes of RAM, so 4096, and you have 2 gigabytes of video RAM memory. We will go ahead and do it in here. I'll show you. So you have 4 gigabytes of RAM, so that's 4096 RAM. And then you have 2048 of VRAM. So now you just add those together. So then you're going to get what? Just over 6,000. Then you subtract 2048 from the bunch. From all three of those. And then that'll give you the amount that you need. In this case, that's how it would work for that. Like I said, though, if you're going to add them all up and you realize that you're already over 10,000 and you're not going to drop below 10,000 when you subtract 2048, that's probably not going to be helpful, so just leave it at 10240. So in this case, like I'm saying, so 4096 plus 2048, I think that's what, 6,144, and then subtract 2048 from that. And what's that going to give you? 4096 again, right? Because you're subtracting the 2048 and 2048. So you want to put 4096 in your ENB local, 4096. Now if you had 4096 RAM and 4096 VRAM, so 4 gigabytes of RAM and video RAM for some reason, you're going to see that's 8,192. Then you subtract the 2048, and that'll bring you back down to like 6,144, etc., etc. Just keep doing it that way. That's the best way to do it. Most people do it that way, and it's the simplest way to do it. Once you have that set up, and that's set up for what you have proper, the next thing is the enable compression. True, you could try True first to see if you have pretty good performance out of it. If you're getting really bad stuttering, try to put that to false. True or false, it really depends on your system. Mine's set to true right now, and I haven't seen any problems, so I leave it as true. Last but not least, auto detect video memory size. Now, I put this on true before I started the video, just to show you a point. If you did it the manual way like I did, 5112 and 10240, and then auto detect video memory size to true, that'll do it for you, and then it'll put the video memory size on its own. Typically speaking, though, when you set that to true, it'll just give you the video memory size of just your video card. So in my case, for some reason, it added both of them. It says I have 4096, which is not true. Their SLI does not mirror, or does not add, it mirrors. So they both have 2 gigabytes. I only have a total of 2 gigabytes. I don't have 4096 anymore. I don't have 4 gigabytes. It doesn't add. So if you want to put that to true, that's fine. If you're going to do it manually like I am, you would put it back to false. Last but not least, these are other ones that you want to test. If you're having weird problems, you can put force borderless to true and borderless full screen to true. That'll help you minimize better. In my case, if I do borderless, I lose performance in my games, so I leave them false. I always do full screen. Now, the rest of this should all be true. Like force anisotropic filtering, true, 16. Display super sampling resolutions, you could put that to true, so then you could downscale from 4K down to 1080p if you're doing. That's a heavy tax on your computer to do that, though. Downsampling is a different way of getting rid of jaggies instead of doing anything, but it's much more intensive on the computer, so I would just not do that unless you have Titan X's or something. Go ahead and do it. I don't care. It's up to you. The last little bits here are a little bit more mundane, but wait busy renderer, leave that false. It's always false. It's for an older setup. Enable FPS limit. If you want to, you can put this as true. I put this as true previously just to prove a point as well. What I have is I have VSync set up in my hardware folder, like in my NVIDIA control panel. That's set up as its own. So this FPS limit's not really doing anything. But you can leave it true as well while using VSync. It's not going to hurt anything. So true or false, depending on what. And then FPS limit, you're going to have to play with this because the FPS limit on your ENB is a little bit wonky. 60 is not always quite 60. Sometimes it's a little bit higher, and if you drop it down to 58 or something like that, it might be 60. Sometimes 64 will be 60. It just depends. You have to play with it. If you're going to use an FPS limiter, I'd probably recommend using NVIDIA Inspector for that, or MSI Afterburner, which is this one here. Those you could use limiting, and they're a little bit more close to correct than this one is. So it's down to whatever you feel more comfortable with. VSync, remember though, VSync's the only way to get rid of screen tearing. So if you're going to use an FPS limiter and not use VSync, so you don't have the lag, say like in Skyrim. For my case with Skyrim, I have terrible input lag if I'm using VSync, and it also lags the game out. Like I'll drop down to 45 FPS randomly just looking down at the floor, even though I'm getting 60 FPS from everywhere else. So I have to use an FPS limiter, but then in that case, I'm getting screen tearing. So then if you want to use adaptive VSync, you could get rid of a lot of the screen tearing, but it's still going to be there. The only way to get rid of screen tearing is to use true VSync. That's the only way to do it. You might get lag in the game, you might not. If you get severe lag where you can't handle it, try to use an FPS limiter and not use VSync. If you can handle the screen tearing, but then have fluid movement and no input lag, more power to you. That's the way I do it. Last but not least, you can find a setup for how to change these key combinations to different numbers online. I've never changed them, so I'm not really going to tell you how. Anti-aliasing, these are the last two things you could do. You can force anti-aliasing through ENB through this setup only. You can't do it through drivers. So the way you want to do is you come in here. Edge AA is like the cheap AA that just gives a little bit better fidelity. I leave it off because it doesn't really help at all. It looks terrible either way. And then accumulative AA, that actually is a little bit more powerful, and it will help out with the jagged screens in the distance, but it will give you a little bit of FPS hit. So if you're already scraping by for FPS, leave this as false. Last but not least, fix game bugs, true. If you're getting like see-through wall issues, though, like at the Camp McCarran or whatever it is, like in their mansion, change that to false for the transparency bugs. Fix game bugs, leave always true. Ignore GAC, you can leave as true or false. It depends on what you're doing. But transparency bugs, put that as true. If you're seeing through walls and you're seeing water through walls and other stuff, put that as false. But that's about it, guys. Last but not least, though, I want to talk about what you're going to have to do in INIs to make sure that this all works properly. Now, once all this is set up and good to go, that's the hard part. Now, this is the easy part by comparison. What you're going to want to do is go to your documents, go to My Games, then Fallout New Vegas. Now, in this case, you're going to see Fallout INI and Fallout Prefs INI. In my case, they're kind of mirrored. They're kind of similar. But what you're going to want to do is go into Fallout INI, and you're going to look for BFloat. And you'll see down here, BFloat point render target, make sure that's set to 1. If you don't have this, you're going to go to display and add this line, BFloat point render target. You're going to add it at the bottom somewhere. Make sure that's 1. If that's not 1, the game will resort, like it'll go back to 0, and it'll resort back to using simpler lighting effects, and then your ENB will not work at all. You're going to get wacky screens, and you're going to not understand why. Nobody wants that, so make sure that's set to 1. I'm not sure in my case. I think I have them in both my Fallout INI and my Fallout Prefs. No, I don't. So it's going to be in Fallout INI. So make sure it's in there. Last but not least, too, when you run your game for the first time, make sure that you have in the launcher, make sure that your anti-aliasing is set to 0 and the anisotropic filtering is set to 0 and water displacement in the advanced options is also unchecked. If these three things are not off, you're going to get weird wonky problems too. If your anti-aliasing is set on in the... Here, hold on, I'll show you so that I'm not stepping over my own words here. So I'm just going to make sure that these are set to read-only because I don't want them overwritten. Just to make sure they're set to read-only. But if you open up your Fallout New Vegas and you go in here, and you go into options, make sure this is on, HDR is on, off, advanced, transparency multi-sampling I have on, but make sure also your water displacement is off here. Also water multi-sampling I have set to low. Okay, go away, son. I have water, that multi-sampling set to low. You can leave all the rest of the same, but make sure displacement is unchecked. Make sure both anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering are set to off, because the ENB handles it. If any of those are set on, you're going to get weird wonky things happening in your game, like the water acting funny, and you're going to see through walls. All that's going to be busted. So after all that's done and said to go, boom, you go to your game, start it up, and it's ready to go. In my case, it works just fine. I'll just go ahead and pop it out. We're going to go ahead and mute the sound, though. There we go. The reason why I'm muting the sound is because I'd rather not hear all the noise when the game starts up because it gets annoying. But, boom. All that's set up in my folder. Everything's ready to go. And then when you open this up here, you're going to see, I don't know if you can see it on the top left corner of my little thing there, but you'll see ENB series, 0.278 for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. Good to go. If you see that in the top left corner, you don't have to worry about anything else because you know that's working. Just remember that when you're in game, if you do Shift-Enter, you'll be able to go in here and then tweak everything subtly to your own regard. That's not part of this video. That's not the scope, so I'm not going to explain all the settings in here. But you could tweak manually while playing the game like that. If you want to ever test to make sure that your ENB is working at all, Shift and F12, you click that to turn that on and off. So if you look in here, since I'm not in game, you can't see it. Use effect is on. Shift F12 will turn that effect off, on, off, on. See? That's it, guys. That's about it for it. The next episode I'll do is of Skyrim because Skyrim's slightly different. So to do Skyrim, I'm going to have to do some other stuff. Explain things differently. So either way, though, guys, I hope this helped you out. I know it's a little bit long of a video, but I like to be very in-depth. I like to go manually, and I do this without a script because when you try to script it, you're going to miss something. Well, if you're talking naturally, sure, you're going to get ums and uhs and then skipping of some things, but I might remember things that I'll forget in a script. If I type the script in and go by that, I don't have any worry about things I forgot. But if I don't have the script written down and I talk to you naturally, I might remember things that I would have forgotten if I wrote it down. So that's why I did it this way, guys. I hope this helped you out, especially you, Dark Man Angel. I'm going to be doing the Skyrim one next, and you guys can look forward to that in the future. But for Fallout New Vegas, since this one's more complicated, that's why this was such a long video. I hope this helped you out, guys, very much, because I know that I had a hell of a time getting it working on my own before, too, because everybody's system's different. If something doesn't seem right to you or you can't figure out something else, just go ahead and leave me a comment below. Just like before, like I always say, if you like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends if this helped you out a lot. If you didn't like, you could dislike, but if you also have questions, go ahead and leave a comment. If you have questions that you figure are embarrassing, because I understand, if I felt like I'm being dumb and like this seems obvious, why can't I figure it out? Go ahead and leave me a private message. That's fine too. You don't have to comment if you don't feel like you want to ask a question to everybody or for everybody to see. But either way, though, guys, I'm going to take off now since this is a 33-minute video now by the end of this. I hope that's not too long-winded. If you want to skip ahead and behind, go ahead and do that. Either way, though, guys, thanks again very much for watching. I hope this helped, and we'll see you soon.